Okay, now when you see or hear the word optimizing, what do you think of? Or what's the root word underneath it? Optimize, and even more than that, I suppose, is optimal, right? Optimal. What does optimal mean? It means best, right? Best, okay? So optimizing is about going through a series of solutions, right? And testing them all out until you get the very best one, okay? So it's about testing multiple solutions until you arrive at the one where you're like, this one is better than all the rest, okay? Because I've sort of given it a test run. I've tried to anticipate what would happen if I use this solution, and this is what gives me the best result, okay? Now, when do we use this? When do people use this? Let me think about this. Number one, it assumes that you know what the multiple solutions are, right? And also that after you test all of them, you sort of got some a concrete way to measure this one is better than that one, okay? So a common example of this for everyday life is when you go to buy shoes, okay? How do you buy shoes? You think about this, okay? Let's assume you pick the style. Let's not worry about the style. That's a very complicated question. We're just trying to pick shoe size, okay? How do you pick shoe size? Okay, so number one, okay, the multiple solutions are very well defined, right? There's size 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, okay? All the numbers are there, right? And it's simply a matter of, okay, well, you know, maybe if you've never worn shoes before, you just wear, I don't know, you wear thongs everywhere or something like that. You're like, I don't know where to start. So you just start at one size, you put your foot in it, and you're like, okay, oh, my toes can't even get into this. I guess that doesn't work, so you go to the next one. And then you go to the next one, right? And then you might get to one, you're like, oh, this is pretty good, okay? You test the next one, and then you're like, oh no, this is worse, okay? Because it went too big, it's too loose, okay? So can you see there, you're testing each one, and then you arrive at one, you're like, yes, this is the one, okay? This is the best. To give you another example, one that's a little more complex, for example, we said shoes, or shoe size. When I cook, at least particular kinds of dishes, right, I test out different recipes with an optimizing approach, okay? So I don't know if any of you eat this. I'm a bit of a fan. It has a Chinese name, which I can't say properly because I can't do intonation. So it would embarrass myself. But pork belly, right? You cook it in an oven, right? And let me tell you a little bit about how it works. You have to. It's sort of like it's the belly, right? So it's the outside. So it's like skin and fat, and then there's meat underneath, right? So here's the challenge, okay? You want really high temperatures to make the skin nice and crispy, okay? But you also want low temperatures so the meat doesn't like full on dry out. Okay. Now, how did I work out? Because you actually have to transition from one to the other. How did I work out? Yeah, no, seriously, right? What temperature did I start at? What temperature did I go to? How long do I stay on this and then go to this, right? So what I did was I just tested it out. I tested out certain temperatures and I wrote down. I think I did it about 8 or 9 times. We were really sick of pork belly after that month, okay? And after a while, I settled on an approach which is like, yep, this is perfect, okay? You start off at 230 degrees, you do it for about 18 minutes, and then you bring it down to about 165, okay? And then you go, depending on weight, you do it anyway. So you go on and on. So, question?
So with this method, if like a solution which is good enough is found, does that mean that people will stop searching? Or will keep on going and testing and seeing what's
Yeah, okay, good question. In terms of optimizing, there is sort of an assumption that either there is a set of, there's a range of multiple solutions which are valid for testing, and you test all of them. You test as many as you can, okay? In the case where it's like, I've got an infinite set, right, they would restrict it to what we call a domain. Right, so this is sort of like maths language, right? So if you've got everything, obviously you can't test every single one. There's an infinite set, right? So you'd restrict it in some kind of band, and you sort of be able to know because after you start going in this particular direction, your answers start to get worse at achieving your outcomes, not better. Okay, but in truly divergent situations, you've raised a problem because how do I test all of them? And I can't, right? So. That's why this is not the only strategy that's used. Okay. Now to bring it down to a little more decision support system-y sort of situation, rather than these which are quite, everyday life. Okay, let's think about investment. When you're dealing with money. Say you've got a whole bunch of savings, okay? Let's say you've got $10,000 in savings, okay? How much do you put into, say, if you have two choices, okay? You might be able to put it into a short-term account, one where you can draw out money at any time, okay? But it only earns such as, an amount of interest. Or you can put it in and lock it in somewhere for, say, 12 months or 24 months, right? For a long period of time. And as a reward for that, they'll give you higher interest, okay? Now, you've got lots of questions to ask, right? Like, what proportion should I have? Because obviously you don't want to put all in there in case there's an emergency, right? But it's probably, pointless to keep all of it here because you don't need all of it at any given time. If you've got, say, $10,000, you generally don't need to draw on that at a moment's notice, okay? So the question of how much should I put in each, it's like, well, that's tricky. Okay, so you might use optimization to run through a bunch of different situations. Okay, maybe 1,000, 9,000, or 2,000, 8,000, or 3, 7, and you get the idea. Okay, and see what kinds of results that would lead to for how much money you would earn off your interest after a certain amount of time, and then you would pick the solution you think is the best. Okay, so that's optimization.